Khmori House hits the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into a special bonus edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff, and that's it today. Lars Hansen was unfortunately unable to join me as I'm getting ready to catch a flight and head back up to the beautiful, somewhat rainy right now, city of Seattle. So just me for the time being. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Coming at you on this Tuesday afternoon with a special bonus episode under unfortunate circumstances because Khmori House has hit the transfer portal. So we're going to get to that. We're also going to talk about some signs of maybe more change on the coaching staff, which is maybe one of the reasons Khmori transferred. I'll get into that in just a second. We're also going to talk about what's next at the linebacker position, because that's going to be really vital moving forward in the Big Ten. And right now, without Khmori House, Washington might not be in the best spot there. So let's get into it. I'm usually somebody who likes to stay pretty upbeat, pretty positive about, some of the good things going on around the program. This is one of those situations where there isn't anything positive that you can really take away from this particular situation, where, keep in mind, for anybody who might have forgotten, Khmori House did enter the transfer portal in January after Kalen DeBoer's staff left. Jed Fish's staff came in. He wanted to test it out, see what was going on. Didn't seem like there was any particular movement there, so decides to come back. He made the right decision. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Freshman All-American, honorable mention from College Football Network, really thrived, Big Ten Freshman of the Week after the Northwestern game, which was his second career start. And just as the season has gone along, it's not just the on-field play. It's Lars and I took some time. We talked to Carson Bruner, Alfonso Tupatala at a press conference in November. And one of the things that they both said was Khmori is really emerging as a big voice. He's a leader in this room. We're really happy he's around. And for all of those reasons, it's really unfortunate that he decided to hit the transfer portal for whatever reason that might be. Personally, I think that this is something where, as Lars and I have said, it's 99.9% certain that Steve Belichick is going to take the defensive coordinator job at North Carolina. And in doing so, Khmori House was the perfect fit for his scheme. Just the more that you look around this defense, Lars and I have talked about guys that have really benefited from this coaching staff, whether it be Alfonso Tupatala, Voit Tanufi, Thaddeus Dixon. Khmori House was in that same mold. He really was, where the way that Belichick's scheme was able to utilize his athleticism, get him out into space. I remember sitting up in the press box at Lumen Field, watching him get his first career start against Washington State, and just saying to Lars, to our buddies Alex Katz and Ben Glassmeyer, saying, hey, that's really interesting. I'm really curious to see what they do with this. And it was due to his speed, his athleticism, his ability to just fly around the football and spy on John Mateer. Obviously, things happened the way they did that day. We don't need to get into that. But the more I look at that, the more I say, this seems to be where that's coming from this angle of, hey, I really do want to follow Steve Belichick. I want to see what that's like. So if I know I'm not the only person saying this, but I would certainly declare North Carolina the leader to secure his services at this point in time. I know he got offered by USC. I know he's going to take an official visit down there, where that might be a closer to home situation. Let's feel that out. Let's see what that looks like, because USC, especially after Zachariah at Branch and his brother hit the portal, that's interesting scenario for another day. But I think this is going to be taken as a really unfortunate case of college football. And I think that anybody who feels that way is 100% justified. Where if you look at this and you say, it's really frustrating to get attached to, player X, player Y, because they might hit the transfer portal after one season to look for, more NIL, look for this, look for that. I think that's justified. I personally wouldn't argue that in any way, shape, or form. But when I look at what this Khmori House situation is, I think that a lot of this really does have to do with his fit in Steve Belichick's scheme. And it's something where when you look at this, where, we know nothing's probably going to happen with that until after the bowl game on January 1st, when Steve's buyout dropped from $1.2 million to zero. So it's going to be easy for North Carolina to swoop in and say, hey, we're going to do this now. It's easy for Washington's coaching staff to, get out of it and not have to really pay anything that way instead of releasing him a couple of weeks early. I know that was a question we got from one of our insiders. So there's a lot of different moving parts there. But at the end of the day, the number one thing is, this is the unfortunate world of college football that we live in. These are things that are going to happen from time to time. And, you like seeing guys stick it out. You like seeing them do this. And if you think you have a particular fit with a coach, again, assuming Khmori does end up on Chapel Hill. I feel like that's a slightly different discussion than just saying, hey, I'm going to go, play for the highest bidder, where that's going to be a factor for a lot of kids. I don't know if that's the scenario here. Lars and I both reach out to people individually. We've talked about it a lot, just, over text since the last time we were able to record. And it's one of those things where I talked to some sources around the program and they all told me the same thing. They said, yeah, this isn't something we were expecting. So a little shocked by that. Again, still an unfortunate situation, but it does beg the question, what's next for Washington, a linebacker? Which we'll get to right after message from the College Football Playoff. It's that time of the year. The College Football Playoff is back with the newly expanded 12-team format. It's guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoff begins on December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern, leading into our first matchup, the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoff presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. So, like I said, this poses a big question for Washington. What's next at the linebacker position? Now, as of this moment, Robert Bala has left this team in a really, really good spot at the position, where there are a couple of younger players in the room. Deven Bryant seems to be a player that this staff likes. We'll see what that looks like in the spring. Hayden Moore was a long-term take where I'm really curious to see how that plays out with him. It seems like he's got all the intangibles. He just hasn't been able to step on the field yet. Spring practice is going to be really crucial for him. And then, of course, there are the three true freshmen at the position. There's Donovan Robinson, there's Jonathan Epperson, and there's Zaydrius Rainey-Sale. Lars and I have talked extensively on this show about how Zaydrius and Donovan, especially with just their physicality and their body type right now, it looks like they're going to be ready to play. The question obviously is going to be, how much are you going to want to rely on these true freshmen in, extended circumstances? We saw how Khmori House was able to take to it. And with these guys being ready for spring practice early and rolling, that's going to be crucial. But the biggest thing is you're going to need some bodies through the transfer portal. We know that they're interested in Jacob Manu. I know he's on a visit right now as we record this today on Tuesday, and it seems like he's not going to be alone. There are going to be other players out there. I've got a whole bunch of questions on, hey, who do you think might be a good fit? I've done some researching. I've seen, things here and there. A name that I've seen pop up over and over again that I've become really curious in is Oregon State linebacker Isaiah Chisholm, where he spent 2 years down there with the Beavers, and he did a really good job developing in 2024, became a crucial part of that rotation, had 75 tackles and a forced fumble this past season, had 14 and a sack as a freshman. So the numbers are there. The numbers are nice. Obviously, with Josiah Trotter going to Mizzou, that wasn't what you wanted to see. And we kind of presumed, hey, with a guy like Jacob Manu coming in, maybe Josiah Trotter didn't want to after winning Big 12 Freshman of the Year, didn't want to reside himself to a more reserve role. He wanted to just go in and start right away, where obviously it's unfortunate the way that worked out now, but that's a big part of it, where Isaiah Chisholm, where now you can rely on somebody like that to potentially step in and start alongside Jacob Manu, where I feel like that's one of the guys that is just widely expected to land with Washington at this point. I know Lars and I have discussed that here on the show. So that's a name that I'm going to be keeping a close eye on. There are a couple other guys that maybe haven't entered their names yet that, I've heard floated here or there. So I'm not going to put any of those out at this point in time. But the more I look at it, the more I say, no matter what's going on with the coaching staff, because I'm going to get there in a minute, no matter what's going on there, Washington is going to rely on these young players, where I think that Zaydrius Rainey-Sale and Donovan Robinson, with their athleticism and with where they are right now in their development, especially physically, I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little further along than where Khmori House is when he came in. And when I say that, I'm not trying to say that they're going to be better than Khmori, anything like that, because, again, that is a huge loss. He was going to be arguably the most crucial piece of your defense in 2025, depending on who you bring in, depending on what happens on that side of the ball. But when I look at them, I say, with their physicality, with where they are right now, and they don't need to necessarily come in and put on a ton of weight like Khmori did, they might be able to handle a little bit more early on spring practice. And that's something that can translate throughout the spring, into the summer, into the fall, through all your workouts. And then all of a sudden, let's say you do bring in two experienced upperclassmen linebackers to help you out, but you can rely on these guys along with, Deven Bryant, with Hayden Moore. All of a sudden, the linebacker depth is there. But one thing I think that you need to keep in mind there as well is, if Washington's defensive line can do its job, we talked about the 2 defensive tackle transfers on the show we put out last night. If those guys can do their job, it makes life easier on the linebackers to just come in and wrap up. where, I think about Ben Burke-Irvin back in the day, where he was such a huge beneficiary of just some of those dominant Washington defensive lines. He was able to come in and do his job, and he did it very well time and time again. And I feel like that's something you could say about, this linebacker group if Washington's defensive front can do its job, and why getting, a piece like Jacob Manu has become so important, and why Lars and I have emphasized it so much, where having a guy like that, a senior who's really productive at his last stop, can just come in for one season, hopefully he's healthy, of course, and just be really productive and bridge the gap, where we kind of expected, hey, yeah, Khmori is going to be that long-term piece. You can put somebody else alongside him. And then all of a sudden in 26, you've got Khmori, you've got Zaydrius Rainey-Sale, you've got Donovan Robinson, Jonathan Epperson, whoever else you want to say in that same mold. Unfortunately, it's not going to work out that way. But getting one of those experienced pieces, two preferably at this point in time, is something that's going to be really beneficial. And it just begs the question, who are these guys going to end up committing to? Which we'll get to right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Quick Thursday night football prop for you. No, nothing Bo Nix related. I'm a huge fan of Courtland Sutton, and I look at his numbers. I look at what the Chargers just had done to them by the Bucs. 40 points. Baker Mayfield was tremendous in that game, and I think Courtland Sutton could be in for a huge day against that secondary. I like his over in catches. I like an anytime touchdown, and give me the over in yards as well. I'm a huge fan of what Courtland Sutton has brought to the table so far this season, and you can check out those odds and so many more over on FanDuel. All right, it's time to talk coaching staff, where Lars and I, for the longest time, we have presumed, hey, seems like Steve Belichick might be alone. If there are guys that follow him, Vinnie Sunseri would certainly be the first name, as he's got a relationship with Bill Belichick. He coached for him in New England for a couple of seasons. And the other name to think about, where it feels a little less likely, in my opinion, but still certainly within the realm of possibilities, is Robert Bala. Now, we're not going to get any potential replacements at this point in time. We're going to let that process play out. We're going to see what happens there. But Khmori House's decision to enter the transfer portal, we'll see if more guys end up following, but it could be a sign of change coming on the coaching staff. We know everybody on the offensive staff is solidified, where they're all Jed guys. They all came with it from Arizona. Jason Kafusi and John Richardson on defense, also Jed Fish guys. So we don't expect them to go anywhere either, which, these are the guys that are outstanding. So I look at this and I say, no matter what happens, I trust Jed to make the right hires, because we've seen him do that already. We saw him make a really good hire in Steve Belichick, and, for reasons X and Y, it didn't look the way that it probably should have in year one. Not to make excuses, but the defensive line's injuries were certainly not helpful in the least bit. But I look at linebacker, I look at safety, and I say those are two very critical positions on this defense. And what have both Robert Bala and Vinnie Sunseri done very well since they've gotten here? They've recruited very, very well. So that's something that I look at and I say, does Jed Fish take a look at Robert Bala and say, because we've floated his name as a potential defensive coordinator replacement, and say, hey, I might not be ready to elevate you to that level, but I want to give you a nice pay bump to make sure you stick around, because I really like what you bring to the table, the way you develop these guys. Look at the way Alfonso Tupatala, Carson Bruner, some of these guys improved over the course of their final season. Khmori House, obviously, prime example there. I look at all those guys and I say, you got to find a way to keep Robert Bala around. And I would certainly say the same for Vinnie Sunseri, especially with the way he's recruiting five-star safety Braylon Womack. He's done a really, really good job there. So there are a lot of moving parts here when it comes to the recruiting as well as the on-field play. But the more that I look at this, it kind of puts some of the status in doubt moving forward. And it's something that you should certainly monitor very closely if you're somebody who's into reading the tea leaves, doing all these different things. Everybody's got their own method for saying, oh, I think this is going to happen. I think that's going to happen. I personally respect all of them. Where the more I look at this, the more I say, all right, there are plenty of different outcomes here, plenty of different options. And if Robert Bala and Vinnie Sunseri both do decide to leave for Chapel Hill because of their relationships with Bill Belichick, keep in mind that Bill Belichick helped Robert Bala get his job here at Washington. We asked him that in spring ball. He said, yeah, Jed Fish called Bill Belichick, asking who he knew. Bill Belichick called Nick Saban, and Nick Saban said, you should check out this Robert Bala guy. It's cool to see how that all came together. It's unfortunate if it comes back to bite Washington at the very end of it because, with these rumors of Bill Belichick reaching out about the Jets job and not really hearing back, however that ended up going down, makes this a little more unfortunate. But when I look at all this, I say there's a lot of big changes coming on the horizon just to the world of college football as a whole. And Washington, with whatever needs you have taken away from this episode, whether it be the coaching changes, whether it be recruiting, whether it be finding a way to utilize more NIL to make sure these guys stay, or whatever message you want to take away from Khmori House deciding to leave, finding a way to make sure you keep these coaches on, even though this is certainly a unique case in that matter. Washington and Jed Fish need to find a way to stay on the forefront of making sure that he has continuity in his staff, because he's preached that. And that's why he brought so many guys with him up here from Arizona to have that, to keep his culture going. And he's done a very good job of that. But year one, you got a chance to build your program. Now it's time to take that big jump forward in year two. You've got the opportunity. The schedule lines up very nicely for you to be able to do that. And now it's time for you to prove it. That's the biggest thing that you can take away from all this is you need to find a way to mitigate the coaching changes, mitigate the transfer portal, bring in these high-level talents that you've said, hey, we're ready to invest. We need to compete. We need to do X, Y, and Z in order to take a big step forward. Whatever hurdles are in your way, you need to find a way to overcome them. And I think that Jed Fish is able to do that, but we're going to find more about that just over the course of the next few weeks. And the best way to make sure that you're up to date on all the latest Husky news is make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, App News, Games on Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating the channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you never miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us 5-star reviews. Those things really do help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Wednesday.